right, welcome to HP to XP. It is Wednesday, the 18th November, and in a couple of minutes here, we are going to be chatting with Sarah Jordan, one of our performers and participants in our upcoming live stream. So I've been working on all of this quote-unquote humor that I've been trying, and thus far, I have not come up with a good, bad, or indifferent joke for today. So I'm going to ask you to be patient. I'm sure I will come up with something utterly terrible as the day goes on. So I'll try and drop a terrible joke on you at some point today. So our guest today, my friend that I'm going to hang out with and have a little chat with is Sarah Jordan. She is a performer. She is a voice actor, and we are going to be talking about some D&D. So why don't we go ahead and bring Sarah in? All right. So,
thanks for
Sarah,
having me.
how are you?
Doing great. Looking forward to everything we're going to talk about today. It's going to be fun.
Outstanding. Yes. So, let's start with this. You run a Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Patreon called RPG Storytelling. What is that all about?
Let me see if I can put it into simple terms. It's all about creating character backstories for RPG players. As I've gone through learning about role-playing games and other cooperative storytelling type platforms, it's usually all of the information you find online or in books and whatever is mostly geared towards the dungeon master, the game master, the lore keeper, as far as how to develop interesting characters and interesting character backstories. But there's not really much out there for the player side of things. So I decided back in August to start putting together some character backstory prompts, which I like to call grain prompts, like grains of glitter or grains of sand. And these prompts that I put out are different ways that you can look at putting together your character's backstory, so that you can, once you bring it to your dungeon master or your game master, etc., they'll have more to pull from in order to give your character and the rest of the storyline more story, more interactions, more encounters that are character driven versus just DM story driven. So putting all of this together has been kind of like something I've had in the back of my mind for quite a while. But doing this as a full thing on Instagram and Twitter and everywhere else, it's given me a purpose. Given with COVID and everything, obviously everything's been put on hold, but this gives something that I can do through COVID, through any other thing that comes up. It's a great way to play around with different things. I love designing characters as a storyteller, so having the option to show other people how to do it as well is something that's actually a ton of fun.
That's cool. That's I think it's interesting. I definitely think that going ahead and finding a way of creating and building out interesting storytelling is it fascinates me. I mean, I'm of the opinion that human beings are natural storytellers, that the way we interact with the world around us is through storytelling. And I think focusing on and learning that process is a super engaging and super interesting one. What prompted you? Was there a eureka moment that said, there's a need for this, there's a space for this, that got you to bring that up?
Like I was saying, when I was first getting into Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing games, I was doing tons of research online, trying to find ways to bring characters to life and bring stories to life. and it was 1,000 for the dungeon master. It's like, this seems a little bit unbalanced. So I think that was the catalyst that brought me into wanting to actually help people to create backstories. There's tons of resources out there for actually building the character themselves,
Sure.
D&D Beyond and everything for actually building the character
Yeah.
sheets. But there's not much out there for actually building a character story, aside
Mhm.
from the couple of prompts that you get from the player's manuals. So wanting to go into depth is really the catalyst that brought me into wanting to do this. And with my lifetime of developing stories and characters, it just seemed like the natural venue.
And was this something that you had sort of an academic background in? Have you studied it? What prompted that desire, that drive?
Thank you for asking that. Yes, actually, I do have some background in it. I've actually got degrees in English and creative writing. So I've got probably in the neighborhood of 20 plus years worth of story writing and character development type exercises that I've built over the years. And with the degree that I gained from college and my lifetime enjoyment of stories in general, it's seemed like the best thing for me to do with an English degree. Because with an English degree, you can mostly do anything, almost, as long as it's dealing with writing. So with writing, developing stories, developing characters, it just seems logical.
Sure. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you also have a background in history.
I do, yeah. Originally got started with history, my love for history, by watching movies like Indiana Jones. That was
Sure.
probably one of my earliest forays into loving history. Then I got into reading and studying mythologies, like specifically Greek and Roman mythologies, Egyptian mythologies. Then I discovered the show Stargate and Stargate SG-1, which exploded my love for mythology because it's all about mythology.
Hmm.
Um, and it just kind of developed from there. It's Indiana Jones into mythologies, playing Tomb Raider games with Lara Croft. Just I kept pursuing my history even before I got to college. It was just passion.
Did you go to college right out of high school, or did you go later in life?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
I actually spent off and on, more on than off, the better part of about 20 years in college.
Okay.
Started out in community college, then transitioned into a tech school, then to another tech school, then into two different universities, then back to a community college. Finally got my associates at the last community
Hmm.
college, and then transferred up to a 4-year university to finish out my bachelor's.
Nice. I did. I followed a fairly similar path. I finished high school. I had gone to a all boys Catholic high school in Chicago and found that I could do just fine in school, as long as there was a threat of divine retribution for not doing my homework. And then uh, went to college and pretty much spent my first semester hanging out and drinking coffee with people and not going to classes.
Mm-hmm.
So went away. I was paying for it myself and was smart enough to say, well, let's not keep doing this. And
Yep.
then went back in my late 30s to finish. So yeah, I
Nice.
get I get how that works. So so you said that it was your love of D&D that sort of prompted this desire to get into helping people create backstories. How long have you been playing D&D?
Uh, I'm actually a fairly new player in the grand cosmos of things. Uh, my first game that I ever played was back in January of this year.
Okay.
So I'm still a fairly new player. But I had been studying characters and studying like all the player manuals and everything else that I could suck in uh, for probably at least a year or two prior to that. It was just a question of finding people to play with it at that point.
Sure. What got you into it? How did you find it?
Well, my getting into the games that I'm in now was prompted by my wife.
Okay.
She's played RPGs for years, but my earliest introduction to Dungeons and Dragons was way back in the early 1980s with the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon.
Sure.
That was my introduction to Dungeons and Dragons, and it just kind of sucked me in. The fantasy of it, the storytelling of it. I mean, yeah, the cartoon wasn't that great, but it was a good entry. But over the years, I kept having this little pull towards Dungeons and Dragons and the gameplay of it, even through all the Satanic Panic and all that went through the 80s. But it was really my wife that really pulled me back into it again, to wanting to actually play the game again.
Nice. And how long has she been playing?
If I had to venture a guess, I would say probably at least 15 to 20 years.
Okay.
Because I think she started when she was in her teens.
Okay, cool. So what in finding this game, in finding this whole little way of storytelling, what once you found the books, what attracted you first and foremost to it? What got you into it from kind of a reader of the books first?
Good question. I would have to say probably going, because I've always kind of been drawn towards the rogue characters, but what actually pulled me in, I think, and got me transitioned to wanting to actually play would have been the storytelling aspect. Because I've always loved games that pull story. So you got like 10 tons of video games out there that you go through all the actions and you get to the end and the game's over. Where's the story? So I've always been drawn towards immersive storytelling games as a whole. So plot is a big thing. But so yeah, it was discovering that the actions and decisions that my character could possibly make would affect the entire breadth of the story, and that's what I loved.
Okay.
It's like I had to jump on that.
Yeah, for sure. So with getting into the game back in January, what was the first character you played?
My very first character, she is a high elf rogue swashbuckler.
Okay.
So I kind of designed her after kind of a cross between Han Solo, Inigo Montoya from Princess Bride, Wesley from Princess Bride, and those types of characters, maybe a little bit of Three Musketeers. But that's kind of the atmosphere, or the what encapsulates her. We're playing it's a game of Strahd, Curse of Strahd. So we're enjoying the fun of that and the horror that's coming out of it. With COVID and everything, we didn't get to play as much as we wanted to, but yeah, that character is going to be enjoying a lot of fun things as we go through it.
Nice. And then what other tabletop RPGs do you play?
So I play in 2 different Dungeons and Dragons campaigns aside from this one. So my wife DMs one, which is Curse of Strahd. I DM one, which is as a brand new DM, starting out with Fandelver, going into Princes of the Apocalypse. And then my wife and I also play in a game of Call of Cthulhu as well.
Nice. What attracted you to Cthulhu?
My love for horror.
Okay.
Yeah, my dad actually got me into loving horror. He and I would actually sit in the couch on weekends and put on a horror movie, he would fall asleep, and I would sit there and just keep watching it. I couldn't get enough. So eventually, when I started getting into studying uh, more story-driven books in the horror genre, it was kind of a cross between absolutely loving all of Stephen King's things and discovering how so many different things were influenced by H.P. Lovecraft and the Cthulhu mythos. It's like, once I found that, it's like, game over. I'm a Cthulhu fan for life.
What, so Lovecraft is an interesting author. And I had not read Lovecraft until much more recently. There was may still be going, I doubt it though. There was a comic book for a little while that Alan Moore was doing called Providence, and it had Lovecraft as sort of its central character in a fictionalized format, right? And it explores a lot of his storylines and his ideas. And that got me into reading Lovecraft and his actual work, and then looking at Lovecraft as a person and going, how do you yeah, he's brutal.
He is.
Yeah. And I mean, I think yeah, and how do you, as a consumer of literature, as a consumer of media, how do you process, how do you reconcile deeply interesting and engaging creative works in light of seeing sort of creators for who they are as people as well, and sometimes not finding them not to be the best human beings?
It's a very difficult thing to do at times. For the artwork side of things, I enjoy the art. There's creators out there that develop some amazing stories, amazing characters, and amazing artwork based on those. But then you look at the person themselves, and for lack of a better way of putting it, they're absolute human rubbish, human trash. And you kind of have to compartmentalize things in your brain to be able to do it. The recent controversies surrounding the Harry Potter franchise, for instance, you've got the amazing characters and the amazing stories that were developed and turned into movies, and they've been loved by generations of viewers and readers. But then you start to hear about the author's viewpoints on specific things, specifically being transgender, like I am. And then you start to realize, I don't really like this anymore. So you have to kind of separate the fact that you like the art, but you want to distance yourself from the creator. And it's not an easy thing, really.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I certainly have found myself struggling with it over the years, and my approach to an understanding of authors, filmmakers, comedians has changed. One of the things that I've done, and I mean, I'm a white, relatively middle-class cis guy. Like the universe was sort of created for me, right? So I recognize that the difficulty settings that I play the game on are normal. They wouldn't be easy unless I had wealth, but anybody that's not me probably has those difficulty settings more challenging. And something that I've recognized is that I'm in a place where I can sort of parse those things and put them behind doors, right? I can just go, oh, well, I don't like what has come out about Kevin Spacey. I don't like what has come out about Louis C.K. I love their work, but now I find things that are very problematic about them for various reasons, and things where I think that they really are very flawed and broken people. And and I also think about the fact that I know I'm a flawed and broken person. You know,
All those people are.
all people are,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
We all have some sort of darkness that we deal with in our lives, and something that I struggle with both as a creator and as a consumer is the idea of how do you parse that? Like, how do you, what's that line where you can be empathetic and understanding without being an apologist for somebody's bad behavior? Um, yeah, I don't know that I have an answer. What, I mean,
Yeah.
do you have any more on that you can, any more thought that you've given to it? Because it's definitely something that I struggle with and wrestle with on a pretty regular basis.
That I would actually say that would actually go into allyship as far as well, for specific topics anyways. You can't really uh, do allyship for human trash, but for groups that are affected by those types of people, it comes down to you need to educate yourself. You need to actually do the work to learn about the people, learn about the issues that they deal with. You may not necessarily know anybody in that category yourself, but if you want to learn how to support a group, for instance, the transgender community, it takes getting out there, learning what it means to be transgender, uh, learning all about pronouns and the different gender identities. I actually did an article for a magazine that I ran for a little while that shows that currently there are roughly around 150 different gender identities around the world. Some are a little more ancient than, uh, but they're still used in some ways. But yeah, 150 different gender identities around the world. You're going to run into at least one of them in your lifetime. It's pretty much a guarantee. But yeah, it's even if you don't know anybody that is not heteronormative, cisgendered, um, you can still learn about the topics. You can still learn about the issues that those communities have to deal with on a daily basis.
So I grew up essentially in a firehouse is the way I describe it. I from the time I was 16 on, I I went to an all guys Catholic high school and then went into the fire service. Needless to say, I have been in a male dominated workspace basically my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
So many things in regards to trans rights are newer things to me. They were not part of my day-to-day experience, and um, so it's definitely something that I've been trying to educate myself about. What are some things, sort of specifically, that um, that you think are important for someone like me who is relatively new to trying to understand this space? And I don't expect you to be
Right.
you're not supposed to be the cis whisperer, right? You're not supposed to
Exactly.
be the sole representative of a worldwide community of people who all have their own individual experiences.
Mm-hmm.
But as somebody who I consider a teammate and a friend, what would you want me to know?
For somebody that's learning about a specific community, like the transgender community, the first place to start would be to start learning pronouns. It's an easy thing to start learning. You don't have to actually do anything to do it. You just start have to learning to use he, him, she, her, they, them, ZZ, or ZZer, and I think there's like several other gender pronouns out there. Some of them get very confusing very quickly, but a general way to look at it is if you don't know a person's gender, use they, them, their. That's the easiest thing you can do. Even if you do know a person's gender identity and the pronouns that they use, it can still be very easy to slip up. Even as a trans woman, I still slip up occasionally. When you come into that situation, kind of like what Matt did on Monday, just for example, he made the little tiny slip, corrected himself, and it just moved on. If you make the slip, kind of correct yourself, and then just kind of keep talking about the fact that you slipped out, it can actually make things worse in a lot of cases. So it's best to, if you make the mistake or make the slip, correct it, move on. So that's the easiest thing to do.
I find it interesting. My wife and I have had a lot of conversations about sort of the broader scope of social justice in the last 10 years of our marriage in particular. And the language around trans rights is one that has been much more frequent in our conversations in the last several years. And one of the things that I think one of the things that it took me noticing in my own speech was the tendency to gender animals that, like, just birds, right? Referring to a bird that does not have sexually dimorphic colors and assigning a gender to it automatically. And it's like, why? Like, okay, obviously there's nothing intentionally disenfranchising about this, but it's still an implicit sort of tendency. Why are you doing that? And using that as sort of a prompt to begin saying, all right, well, I can tell the difference between a male and a female cardinal. That's pretty obvious. They have very different, you can tell looking at them. Yep. But that's not the case with everything. And learning that tendency, I think, has been a big thing for me, is just starting to look at sort of these looking at my implicit beliefs, right? The heuristics and sort of some of the biases that are just baked into how I was raised, where I came from. You know, I certainly wasn't raised in a way that promoted bigotry, but I certainly was raised in an area that tolerated it.
Oh yeah.
Like it was 100% acceptable. So it has been sort of a learning process in that respect. What's another thing that I should know when it comes to sort of allyship and attempting as a, you know, cis white dude living in a fairly heteronormative lifestyle? What's something that I can do beyond pronouns to be a good ally for the trans community?
Another good thing you can realize as far as allyship, and this goes for any community, transgender, African American, Hispanic, etc., is that you got to realize that allyship isn't just saying, I support them. It's actually getting out there and doing the work. You got to actually put the work in to help forward the concerns and the issues that community is having to deal with. With the transgender community, it's having to deal with misgendering, it's isolation, it's the constant murders that are going on around the world just for being transgender. It's actually for allies, it's actually putting yourself out there, and instead of relying on the transgender community to do all of our own work, it's saying, you know what, you've got enough on your plate. Let me help. Let me put my name into the hat for supporting these rights. Let me do some of the legwork to get these rights and these issues resolved. Because if the transgender community has to do it all themselves, or the African American community has to do it all themselves, it goes nowhere. We do all the fighting every day, obviously, but it's when we get our allies to help get our voices out there, that's actually another good one. Is actually not trying. There's a good term that has come out over the last several years. It's called mansplaining, where a man would try to explain something that a woman would already know. Um, it kind of goes the same for every community. Don't try to use your experiences as the ally to explain what the transgender community is going through or the Black community is going through. Give us a fight to give us room to actually share our stories the way we need to do it. That's what we're still hoping that Hollywood does, is give the LGBT community the option or the opportunity to actually tell our stories with our people.
Sure. Yeah, it's, again, as somebody who very much processes aloud, I process a lot of trying to understand things and learn about the world. I process out loud, so I often fall into that trap of dominating a space conversationally, even if it's not intended, because I'm talking through things as much to understand them as I am to try and explain it to anybody else. So I think learning how to shut up has been an incredibly useful skill for me. Definitely. Personally, in a lot of spaces. Getting older has helped tremendously with that.
Definitely doesn't hurt.
Yeah, like I found that the older I got, the easier it was to just kind of go, I don't need to open my mouth here. I probably don't know what I'm talking about. Let me just move on. So we have hey Thurl, hey Friday, hey Steph. So Steph has a great question. What are your 2 favorite D&D classes and why?
Well, I've always been a fan of the rogue. It's just, it feels like one of the most diverse classes. As far as you can go for the dark, secretive assassins. You can go for the more flamboyant swashbuckler. If you want to add a little magic, you've got the arcane trickster. So there's so many different things that the rogue can do, even if they don't inherently have magical abilities, aside from the arcane trickster. But so the arcane rogues are just fun. I like in my life, I should say, I've always loved being able to sneak around. When I play video games that are like first-person shooters, I always wind up becoming like a sniper. So I like being in the shadows, doing my thing, sneaking out to do the fighting, and then sneaking back to the shadows. It's always been a fun thing for me. On the flip side of that, I actually, even though I haven't actually played one yet, I love the Druid.
Why?
Druid, mainly because their connection to animals and nature. I've always had a connection to nature. I love going to the woods, into the mountains, going to the beach, just being part of nature. And the fact that a druid can actually beast shape or change into different animals, it just seems like so much fun. I've always wanted to fly, turn into an eagle. Sure. I want to swim, turn into a dolphin. It just seems like so much fun to me.
Yeah. So you have a connection with animals. Are you a pet owner?
Yes. We actually have 2 cats. We've got a black and white tuxedo. His name is Chewy, which is short for Chewbacca. He actually does this cute little trill that actually sounds like Chewbacca. So it's absolutely adorable. He's our old man. I think he's 15.
Okay.
Maybe might be a little bit younger than that. But then we've got an all black cat. His name is Hunter.
Of course, named after the 80s cop show.
Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
Just checking.
Yeah, he's our ADHD cat. he he loves to get into everyone's business, even
Mhm.
if he has nothing to do there. He just likes to get into your business. He's yeah. I can't really put it any better way. He's definitely got ADHD.
Okay.
He's all over the place, but he's so adorably lovable. They both are, and Hunter will actually force himself into your lap and into your life just so you can love on him more.
Mhm.
It's adorable.
So why aren't you playing a druid in our campaign?
I considered it actually,
Okay.
but I was too drawn to the road to switch this time. But
Okay.
if the circumstance does come up where my character doesn't make it to the end of the campaign, I will definitely be going for a druid.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah, don't kill me
So
just because of that.
not just because of that. So what prompted you to throw your hat in the ring for a live stream D&D campaign?
um, well, my home games they were kind of very irregular. Um, they didn't have like a set schedule. I like being able to play as often as possible and only being able to play once or twice a month, maybe once or twice every 3 or 4 months. It's like it just wasn't as satisfying to me. And
Mhm.
then I started watching shows like Critical Role, where it's like every single week you get another episode. It's like, ooh, I want to do that. So
Mhm.
I love the fact that it's going to be a regular game, something I
Right.
can look forward to every single week.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. Um so obviously folks in chat can ask questions anytime they want, but I want to give you an opportunity to ask some questions. What would you like to know about what's in store with this campaign? Obviously, I'm not going to answer every question, but you can
Of
ask.
course. Let's see where to go for my questions. Um, I know that my character uh, starts out kind of in like a mountain range. I won't
Mm-hmm.
say where yet because I don't want to give too much away.
Outstanding.
Uh, but what are the political differences between the two sides of the mountain?
Oh, sure. That's pretty easy. So the northern end of that mountain range, and it's the Haldir Mountains.
Mhm.
The northern end of that range is a place called the Commonwealth, and the Commonwealth is a human-dominated political entity. It is ruled by five uh, creators who have the responsibility of governing the whole of um, this political entity, and they share responsibility both geographically as well as coming together and having responsibilities for the whole. The southern side of the mountains is the Politeia Flar, which is comprised of elven dominated city states. So rather than having any sort of unified political force, they are very much these pockets of political power with lots of um, um, non-governed land might be the best way to say it, that surround these city states, and sort of more free commonwealth type spaces that sort of just blend into one another. The lines aren't so hard drawn.
Okay, good to know. Um, let's see. Knowing what you know about my character,
Mm-hmm.
um, what are the relationships like between my character's society and those of the Politeia?
Mm. So that's um I think we can say that you're going to be playing a drow.
I
I don't
am.
I don't think that's going to be a terrible spoiler for the campaign. So the relationship between Drow community and the Politeia at large is a generally arm's length sort of one. Unlike in some campaigns where it is openly hostile and an active conflict between the Drow and the Elven communities at all times. That's not the case in our setting. They are very much wary of one another. There is a lot of distrust, a lot of discomfort, but they are in a time period where there is not open conflict. There are low intensity might be a better way of saying it, sort of diplomatic relations between the two communities. There was a time further back in the history of Umbranthal where the Drow and the non-Drow elves were much more collaborative than they are now. And there may have been times where they weren't anywhere near collaborative. Only time will tell how that works out. Over in chat, Friday would like to know, why did you choose to play a Drow?
Why did I choose to play a Drow? Probably because it's out of the ordinary. I've played my other high elf rogue. She's an elf. She's got the storyline of being a high elf and from royal families and stuff like that. But I wanted to try to focus on, with this campaign, something resembling a character that's coming from an outsider's society, and that's got to try to fight to, or not necessarily fight, but try to do everything she can to learn how to become part of normal society, or the stereotypical normal society. And the Drow is like the perfect way to do that, because they're commonly ostracized from society. They're looked at as other, and I thought that this would be a great way to introduce the other as actually being normal.
Mm-hmm.
The Drow, they're elves. They've got a different color skin, but they're still elves.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a great way to introduce that type of storyline into this storyline arc, where she's got her own past and she's got her own things she's got to figure out, but she's also got to figure out how to be part of an adventuring party, how to be part of open society, and
Right.
actually be comfortable with herself at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's one of the things that I think has been interesting to see is sort of the shift in storytelling in general, and Dungeons and Dragons being a space for this, to recognizing that we, as we come to understand society more and more, we come to understand that it's unlikely that there are such clear-cut binaries as good and evil among groups of people. Every one of us does good things. Many of us do shitty things. A handful of people do things that probably warrant the label of evil. But none of us is wholly good. And I think that it's interesting to see that understanding work its way into storytelling in general, and Dungeons and Dragons in particular in this case. Tasha's just came out yesterday, and I think that there's a lot to be said for the way that book is trying to sort of codify those ideas as being acceptable within the canon of Dungeons and Dragons. Opening up the opportunity to not stick with these very firm archetypal racial standards and say, well, here's some ways you can play around with this. I think that's good. As a storyteller, though, as somebody who has studied literature, what are your thoughts on sort of those two worlds sort of butting heads a little bit? The the importance of archetypal myth butting heads with a more deconstructionist, post-structuralist sort of viewpoint. Like, how do you what's that middle ground look like for you, where those two things start to kind of interplay with one another, and how do we draw the benefits of both perspectives without having to claim a side?
I think there's always a middle ground in any situation. Sometimes it might be like razor thin, but there's always a middle ground. I know with my character being a drow, drow have historically, not necessarily in Umbranthal alone, but in uh, the D&D world as a whole, drow have historically been seen as more aligned with the evil side of things, the evil side of alignments. But there are also good drow as well.
Yeah.
So I think that with my character, she was raised in that evil side of things, and then she starts to learn things through books and other things that she reads, and sees that she doesn't have to be that way. So she can actually choose for herself, and choice is always a big part of it. She can actually choose for herself to distance herself from that evil side of things and try to find ways that she can not necessarily redeem herself, but learn how to adjust her way of thinking. She's still got all of the things she's been taught over her life, but she's also got all of these new things she can learn as well. So for her, I'll give away her alignment. She has moved away from the evil alignments of the Drow Society, or stereotypically, and is moving into a chaotic good. So she's striving towards good, but she's still got some of that chaotic nature from the evil side of things. So certain ways that she'll do things will play out in really interesting ways, because she tries to do good, but it comes out very chaotic in the way she goes about it.
Sure. I know for me, I think about the alignment system in D&D very much in uh, both sort of political and ethical frameworks. You know, the lawful, neutral, chaotic, I tend to think of as political frameworks, and the good, neutral, evil as more ethical frameworks. And you know, I think there's a tendency for, certainly when I was growing up and playing the game. I mean, I've said before, I started playing the game at like 10 years old. That the idea of playing a chaotic character was always sort of synonymous with evil, right? That the idea of playing a chaotic good character didn't make any sense when I was younger. And one of the things that I have sort of come to understand is that if you really dig into the books, certainly fifth edition, but I've gone back and reread a lot of my second edition books, and I think that it was there then. I just was too young to understand it. That lawful in the context of D&D is really about saying that you believe in the system, right? That whatever the dominant system is, you support it. And chaotic is whatever the dominant system is, you don't necessarily support it. You might on any given issue, but you're much more open. And you know, I know personally, if I were to assign an alignment to me as a human being, chaotic good, I think, would probably be the way I live my life. From the idea of storytelling and the ethical framework of it, what do you think constitutes evil in your head when you're talking about whether it's lawful, neutral, or chaotic evil character? What does an evil character in D&D mean for you as a storyteller?
As a storyteller, I would say lawful evil would be someone who sees the rules and sticks exactly to the rules, and they don't deviate from those rules. So for a lawful evil, it would be like, let's see. Let me go with a Star Wars reference because I know we're both familiar with Star Wars. I would actually see the Emperor as lawful evil.
I can buy that.
In that he's got a set path, and he follows that path. He does different things on various sides, but he's got a set path that he's set out. So he's lawfully going towards his own evil pursuit. Doesn't matter what it means for anyone else, but he's got his focus. Chaotic evil, on the other hand, would be something more along the lines of Kylo Ren. So he fluctuates back and forth between the good and the bad, but he's like mostly the bad side of things, at least until his redemption arc. But he flip flops back and forth over what he wants. He knows what he's supposed to do and what he thinks he wants to do, but he kind of is like all over the place in actually accomplishing it. For flipping over to the chaotic, or flipping over to the good side, I would see Han Solo as definitely the chaotic good. He's got it. He tries to do the right things. Doesn't always succeed, but he tries. Tends to go about things in very interesting ways to get there. Sometimes it's leans a little more to the dark side. Sometimes a little more to the light side. But he tries to do good. Lawful good, however, I would definitely see as Yoda.
Okay.
He's just like the antithesis to the Emperor, in that he does everything good. He sees both the dark and the light, but he still sticks straight to the good. He does everything he can not to deviate from that at all, because he knows what the dark side of things can wreak havoc in the world. So he does everything to avoid that.
So you studied literature and I studied a whole bunch of philosophy. So my follow-up question then is, I absolutely agree that both Yoda and Palpatine are lawful characters. They both believe in the importance of structures and systems. What makes one of them good and the other evil? And I think more than even dealing with Palpatine, what makes Yoda lawfully good? Why is he good?
It's actually all a matter of viewpoint. Because no matter who you are, you always think you're the hero of your own story.
You would have gotten extra credit points if you had said from a certain point of view, but that's okay. Go on.
Try or try not. But yeah, with Yoda, he's seen as good, and he sees himself as good because he's working to benefit everyone instead of just trying to benefit himself like the Emperor. He's trying to do good works to benefit the entire galaxy. He's trying to bring peace. He's trying to bring stability without conflict, without hate, without anger. Whereas the Emperor thinks that he's the good because he's doing everything the right way, or at least he thinks he is. He's doing it the right way according to his own beliefs. But at the same time, he's causing death and destruction all over the galaxy. So it's all in the matter of how the character views themselves and what they set out for themselves. So causing peace and prosperity is seen as good. Causing death and destruction to suit my own goals is good, but it's all a matter of perspective.
How do we, as both observers of real human behavior, but also of the morality that is portrayed in fiction, how do you make the determination about what is um what is the acceptable line, maybe, is what I'm looking
Mhm.
for good? Because I think we could argue that while yes, throughout the stories the Jedi are overwhelmingly portrayed as the good,
Mhm.
in many situations you would have to say they're the better,
Yeah.
but they're not necessarily great.
Right.
There are a lot of uh, oppressive and disenfranchising behaviors that the
Mhm.
Jedi just kind of shrug their shoulders and go, "Not my problem," you
Exactly.
know. Um, so for you, where does that line fall? Where is sort of the responsibility? Where does the responsibility lie? What do we expect of people if we're
Mhm.
going to consider them good? Um, More so in fiction. It's easier to address in fiction
Right.
a little bit, I think, than in real life. But
Um,
for
I,
you,
I would
where's that line?
I would say it's all a matter of who does it benefit? Who does the action that you're doing benefit? Does it benefit you or does it benefit everyone? Um, if you're looking at if it benefits just the character themselves or the individual, then you have to look at is it going to harm anyone else if this succeeds? Is it going to um, cause me to become uh, is it going to cause me to become the bad guy even though I'm doing good for myself? Or am I or is this thing going to cause peace and happiness for others because I've caused peace and happiness for myself? Um, on the flip side, you've got uh, is it going to benefit everyone else? But what is it going to benefit me as well? So it's kind of a hard out of the frying pan into the fire thing because you
Mm-hmm.
got the 50-50 thing of perspective for who does it benefit, how is it going to affect everyone involved, and what is the outcome going to be. So it's kind of a slippery slope both ways.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Um, yeah,
I agree. The joys of living in a universe in which we cannot predict all possible
exactly.
outcomes. Yeah, the alignment of the universe is chaotic neutral.
Yes, it is.
100%. Um, so any other questions for me about the upcoming campaign, the things that we're going to be doing as a group? Again, I may or may not answer, but I'm always keen to be asked.
One thing I'm most curious about, at least even before we get started on the campaign, is when we're gonna get to see everyone's character art.
You and me both. So for the folks watching, we have commissioned art for all of the characters, and it is being developed thus far.
Mhm.
Sarah's character is the only one whose art is 100% back, and it is pretty amazing. So
Absolutely
the
gorgeous.
the artist that we are working with is doing a phenomenal job with the character art. We have another artist who is doing all of our Twitch art for our emotes and sub badges and stuff like that, and that art is phenomenal as well. It's been really exciting to work with such an amazing team of collaborators, both the players that we're going to be working with, but also the artists, the people doing production stuff. It's
Mhm.
super engaging. So the um, it'll be out by our first game session. That's all I can say with certainty right now.
Yeah.
But it is in play and coming down the line, so um, it should be exciting to see. I'm looking forward to it. The sketches that we've seen of everybody's respective character art has been really incredible. So
Mhm.
it's yeah, I'm
Yeah.
definitely looking forward to it as well. Uh, what I know one of the things that you have gotten into in more recently in your life is working on voice acting and
Yes.
working to get into voice acting. What I think that's a great tool in the toolbox for a D&D player because it does allow you to embody a character more readily. I also think that it's really good when you are able to sort of separate your speech as a player from your speech as a character. I think that it's helpful for everybody at the table when that can be done. What got you into voice acting and the desire to do that?
I will say that when I was little, I used to watch a lot of cartoons. One of my favorite was always Donald Duck. So I started kind of just playing around with that and trying to imitate the way that Donald Duck talked. And it finally clicked when I got a sneeze. I actually managed to duplicate Donald Duck's sneeze, which is just a simple. So it's really simple. And then you kind of find that it's all in the cheek and where your tongue is placed in the cheek. And it's kind of hard to translate over audio, obviously, but
Sure.
But yeah, you kind of start playing with it and you start finding, okay, I can do this voice. What other voices can I do?
Mm-hmm.
I kept watching cartoons and saw Kermit the Frog, Yoda, Bobby from Bobby's World by Howie Mandel. Then the Black Cauldron came out, and I started learning how to do Gurgi's voice, which was a fun one to do. I still do that one on occasion. Then from there, you start watching more movies as outside of the cartoons, and you start hearing different accents as well. Sean Connery was one of my favorite actors before he passed away recently, and his voice, his accent, just stuck with me so heavily that I started trying to mimic that. And Scottish actually became one of my best accents. And then I kind of transitioned from that, or kind of started doing variations of that and discovered I can do Irish as well, which is very similar to Scottish, just a little bit more bright. Then I started moving in.
And less likely to surrender to the English, just as
very true.
Pointed out.
And then started getting into moving away from the British Isles over to French. French is it's a very glottal. It's very back here, and it's a lot of fun to play around with. When I was actually doing a couple of French classes back in college, my instructor was actually extremely impressed with how natural and how authentic my accent was when I was doing French. Don't really remember much of my French lessons, but the accent stuck with me. And then I think it was back in the early 90s, early mid 90s, I had seen an ad in the local newspaper back in Phoenix, Arizona, and it was an ad for voice actors. I decided I need a job. I'm going to go apply for this because I love doing voices. I love doing accents. So I figured I'm going to go apply for this. I was accepted. Unfortunately, I didn't follow through with it because at that time I couldn't afford all the headshots, which were expensive. But it developed in me a love of wanting to get into entertainment, get into different things that I could do with my voice and get paid for it. And then you shoot forward several years, a couple decades, and I discovered that I'm not really doing much in the way of things that I really love for work-wise. So I want to get into something that I actually love, something that brings me joy, as well as other people. So I started looking at voice acting again. And right about that time, my wife and I were about to move down here to Los Angeles, which is like the capital of the world for voice acting, and discovered this is like the perfect opportunity for me to get into this. So I started buying all my equipment, my microphones, I've got my vocal booth studio right behind me in the closet, and I just started putting everything together. Still can't quite afford to get my demo made yet, but I can still teach myself how to be a voice actor. I can teach myself how to slow down and start putting words where they're supposed to be, start becoming more of a voice actor so that I can maybe do ASMR or read books,
Sure.
audiobooks.
Yeah.
So it's the whole world of voice acting just opened up for me in that I have all of these possible options now of things that I can do.
Mm-hmm.
I've already got the skills for it. I just got to develop I just have to develop those skills better.
Sure.
But yeah, it's being a creative person and having a creative job and a creative outlet like this, between voice acting and Dungeons and Dragons, it's like my perfect world.
Yeah. That's awesome. So Friday would like to know what your favorite voice slash accent is to do, and if you will do a demo.
I suppose that Scottish is probably my favourite accent to do. It's one that I'm most familiar with. Um, it's one that I love to do every chance I get. If I want to spice it up a little bit, I'll go from the Scottish into the Irish, which is just a little more bright. So you don't necessarily finish all of your sentences, don't finish all of your words, but you can transition back and forth between the Irish and the Scottish. So Scottish is more refined, Irish is a little more bright. And those are my two favourite ones to do.
Outstanding. So I'm curious how how do you see what are your thoughts about how you want to grow as a performer through this campaign?
I'll definitely
This
keep
question isn't for anybody else. This is just for me so that
just
I
for you.
get some more ideas.
Yeah, definitely want to improve upon all my voice acting skills, obviously, but it's a chance to act. I want to be able to improve upon my ability to act and improv, and Dungeons and Dragons is a great way to practice all of that. So I'm really looking forward to being able to develop that cohesive storyline with everybody else, to try to improv with the other characters as much as possible, to not only develop my own skills as an actor and voice actor, but also to help them develop as well in that same area. And also develop the improv skills to, okay, they said this, how do I react? How do I converse with them on this topic that's not necessarily in my brain, but it's all storyline. So getting to play around with that storyline is going to be a lot of fun, and especially if we get to screw you up a little bit.
Well, as every D&D game works, the entire job of the party is to mess with the DM.
Exactly.
So, Dr. Wyvern, I apologize for misattributing your question and request for an accent. I trying to read chat out of the corner of my eye. I thought it was Friday, so I apologize for the misattribution. Thanks, Dr. Wyvern, for asking the question. If anybody else has questions for Sarah, please throw them in chat. We'll get to those as well. So beyond stretching your legs as a player, beyond stretching your legs as an actor, what is something else that you feel like you are bringing to the campaign table that you want to show off, and not in a one-upmanship sort of way, but just in a here's a skill set that I have and I want to trot it out.
Well, aside from the voice acting thing, I would say probably here's how I can contribute to the story. It's how can I mess up the story, how I can drive the story, how I can. Oh, let's see. Yeah, I want to see what I can do with this character, both conversationally and actions. I want to see where the story goes.
Okay. What are some things you want to see from me as a DM? What do you think I should bring to the table?
Storyline, obviously.
Okay.
That's pretty much a given.
I'll start there.
Yeah, it's a good place to start. I know as somebody that's always been fond of Critical Role, I will say that as often as you are able to and feel comfortable doing, I would love to hear your takes on various character voices, and to see how they really throw off the rest of us, especially if it's like an absolutely hilarious voice. I want to see how long it takes us to come back to character after laughing so.
Well, they will. I guarantee you, if they are hilarious, it will only be because they are hilariously awful. So I do not possess your voice acting skills. Doesn't mean I won't try, but
of course, it's all about the try.
Let's set expectations exactly where they belong, not high in this case.
Yeah, in this case, Yoda is definitely not right. There is definitely a try.
Oh yeah, at best. No, I think he's right. There is a do not.
Yes.
I am much more likely to not succeed in attaining that quite well. But Sarah, I'll work on the jokes. I'll see what I can do.
Sounds good. I'm still waiting for your joke for today.
Yeah, I'm still struggling. I got to be honest. There's the problem is all the ones that are stuck in my head are completely inappropriate.
Oh no.
Even for Twitch, which is saying something. I don't want to violate a terms of service thing, but that's just where my brain's at today. So, all right, I got it. Right. So, String walks into a bar. Bartender says, "Get out of here. We don't like your kind in here." Goes outside, puts on a hat, goes back in. Bartender says, "You're that String that walked in here before. I can tell what you are underneath that hat. Get out of here." String goes back outside, walks around for a minute, does a little bit of yoga, does that, walks in. Bartender says, "Aren't you that String that was just in here?" He looks at me and goes, "Afraid not."
Love it. No matter how many times I hear that one, I still love it.
That's the terrible one for today. I'll work on more terrible material later. See, I have friends who actually get paid to do stand-up comedy. I am not part of that group.
Yeah, you and me both.
Obvious reasons. Obvious reasons.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, I think we have, I hope we have answered everybody's questions. Thurl, I appreciate the sympathy laugh. Thank you. You'll learn. Don't humor me. It only encourages it, but that's okay. So I'd like to thank everybody who did take time out of their day and jump in with us today. Sarah, thank you so much for jumping in on us. Where can everybody find RPG storytelling?
On Instagram, you can find us at RPG_storytelling. On Facebook, it's RPG storytelling, no underscore. On Twitter, it's Fairy Fire RPG, FAERIEFYRE RPG. On Patreon, it's patreon.com/RPG storytelling, no underscore. And then over on Twitch, which we are on right now, I've got my own channel, which is also Fairy Fire RPG.
Outstanding. And for those of you who would like to catch up on some of that stuff, you can find those links in our HP to XP Discord server. And also, when this video goes up on YouTube, we will have links down below in the doobly-doo. And thank you, Steph, for putting all of those in the chat right now so folks can check those out. So,
Yay.
with that, we are going to wrap up our chat for this evening and get ready for our next victim next week for these introduce the cast interviews. Again, thanks everybody for taking time out of your day, jumping in, joining us. Our campaign is going to begin live streaming on December 16th, Wednesdays from 7 until sometime. That will be Eastern Standard Time. 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesdays will be our live stream campaign. The next couple of weeks, we are going to be continuing to focus on introducing our performers, as well as continuing to do streams talking about what the campaign is going to look like, what the world is going to look like, and answering questions about that. So you can check us out here. You can check out hp2xp.com. You can find us on Discord and in all of the social places. So for everybody who had time for us today, I appreciate you coming and hanging out with us. We'll see y'all soon. Cheers.